This podcast will not be held hostage to dictators like this.
Oh, God.
You are going to a meeting with Charlie Brooker tomorrow.
Oh, my God. When we come to an ending, we're looking for two things. We're looking for, are we surprised by this? And was this ending inevitable?
Hello, and welcome back to Two Tickets, Please. I'm your host, Nalin, and today joining me on the episode is Geetu. And I know what you're wondering. You're thinking, hey, Nalin, where's the introductory joke? Well, the thing is, last time that Geetu and I sat down in an episode, Geetu had told a joke that really blew me away. So I wanted to throw to you, Geetu, and say, have you added a new joke in your arsenal?
You know, Nalin, it's in the works. So we're prepping. We're really making sure that the jokes are original and, as we discussed, need to be very appropriate. Mm-hmm. So we're working on it. And equally, I'm going to withhold the jokes because I reckon I need some leverage to, be a recurring guest on the pod. So
right. So this is just
we're holding it hostage. We're holding the jokes hostage.
This podcast will not be held hostage to dictators like this.
Oh God.
So all right, Geetu, we're gonna have to negotiate now.
Okay, let's negotiate.
I'm going to enact a retaliatory leverage position.
Okay.
Which is that we're not going to do another episode until you have new jokes to offer.
Fair enough.
So everyone watch out for that because this could get spicy very quickly.
No, it's not going to be spicy. It's going to be very tasteful.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yes. Anyways, there's a lot at stake here, Geetu. I wouldn't take this.
Your reputation is at stake.
And yours. Okay. Well, so the fact that you haven't come up with jokes.
I have.
Oh, you have?
I'm withholding them.
You're withholding them, right. What have you been doing, Geetu? Have you been busy?
Yes. Producing your podcast, Nalin.
Oh, I see. Well, good work. It's going well. I promise it's going well. I've been busy too. Thanks for asking. I've been busy because I've been binging Black Mirror Season 7. As of you. You were there. You know it.
We were sitting next to each other, correct?
Yeah, I think, honestly, when I heard that the new season was coming out, we had sort of earmarked it in our calendar because it was obviously in a very anticipated release, right? As fans of Black Mirror over the years, I was really looking forward to seeing what they're going to present this season, especially given how much time there's been since the last season and how much the world has changed. So yeah, it was really exciting that we finally got to watch it. And I think what we're going to do this episode is we're going to break it down. We're going to talk all about Season 7, but also maybe about a few other things. But for the listeners, Geetu, for people who haven't watched Black Mirror, how would you describe it? I heard that you had a really articulate and well thought out response planned.
Wow, putting me on the spot.
That's right. Two can play at this game.
What's been really exciting has been that though we watched it together, we've actually not discussed our thoughts about the episodes yet.
That's true.
And so, for everyone tuning in, we want you to feel like this is a real-time conversation. So join in, tell us what you think as well, because it's quite exciting to now sit down and speak about it. And Black Mirror is a real cultural phenomenon because it is a metaphor fundamentally of Black screens, right? Our iPhone as an example, our iPad, any screens that are a reflection back to us, the habits or the tendencies we have, and equally a commentary on broader societal, political, technological advancements and changes.
Yeah.
It falls under a really unique genre, which is the genre of dystopia.
Yes.
Which is such a unique portrayal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting where you defined what Black Mirror means. I think there's actually a lot of takes on what the meaning, what the title means. So
what are the theories?
The first obvious one, which is what you just mentioned, was, when you're using your phone and the screen goes blank, it's like a black mirror and it sort of reflects who you are through the lens of tech, right? And I think that's quite representative of the series in general. The second definition of it is, I guess, more along the same lines of a reflection on society, but the word black connotes maybe a more negative or alarming, dark sort of interpretation of what the world is. And the third one, again, along similar lines, but apparently in the field of divination, there's a concept or a thing known as Black Mirror, which is used to look into the future.
Whoa.
So I think if you consider this series as a tool to, project into the future, and therefore it becomes quite, it makes sense it's a dystopia because it's painting a very almost like this is what could happen in the world if we're not careful.
That position really lands because if we reflect on the way the episodes are written, they are very much about forecasting in the future, right? And for me, something that I have always enjoyed about Black Mirror is that there's a really great balance of the humanity that the actors preserve and they echo with the, technology or, the commentary that the writers, strive to convey in their narrative arcs. So I like that balance of the human story paired with that dystopic context.
Absolutely. And speaking of dystopic contexts, I think we've seen a lot of this kind of stuff
lately.
Recently.
I mean, our real world is low-key a bit of a dystopia lately.
And I wonder if that's one of the main contributing factors to why we're seeing more dystopian stories on screen and maybe even in other art forms emerge again, because maybe it feels more relevant to the world we're living in. I mean, as an example, we recently watched Severance, which I think we could classify as a dystopia.
100%.
Right? And then, of course, there's Black Mirror, a movie that I don't think you've seen this one, but I watched it last year. It was an Indian movie called Kalki, 2898 AD, which in many ways is very similar to a really notable film from a few years back called Children of Men.
Oh.
I think Kalki it takes it to another level, but has a very similar premise of we're in a world where children cannot be born anymore, but then there's one woman who is able to birth a child, and that's how revolutionary that is. So that's what Children of Men was about. And that's sort of where Kalki takes us to. I think there's other shows which we haven't seen, maybe things like The Handmaid's Tale, which I believe also...
It's based on a book series.
Okay, it's based on a book series and delves into this space a little bit. Or Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Very popular dystopia.
Dystopia, back in Australia when I was teaching, was a very prevalent genre that we taught in the English literature program.
Yes.
Because it's... dystopia actually has been a big genre focus in young adult fiction. So Hunger Games is young adult. Divergent, Maze Runner, these were all kind of narratives or stories that were built out into series that came out in that young adult fiction genre. For me, one of my favorite books in the dystopian genre is The Giver by Lewis Laurie. Did you ever study that? Or it's pretty well known.
I remember it being in a unit in high school.
Probably.
I do not remember the story of it though. For me, it was 1984.
Classic.
I think George Orwell was almost like the Shakespeare of dystopia.
Right. Best way to describe that for sure.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting how it was so prevalent. I think when we say, I don't know when The Giver was published, but something like 1984, ironically, was published in 1948.
Yes.
Off the back of World War II.
Correct.
And then now, 70 odd years later, we're at this space again where we're saying, hold on, people are presenting the world with dystopian elements. And is it because our artists are seeing the world in that light? Or maybe it's kind of like a warning of hey...
Caution.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a word of caution. But does it make you enjoy dystopia more? Having, if you feel okay, we're living in a world where there's a lot of political unrest, there's war, there's, cost of living crisis, there's environmental degradation around the world. Do you feel like watching a dystopia about these themes is disturbing or is it comforting?
I think when we explore it in that way, absolutely can feel really disturbing. It's that kind of feeling of, why should I even read the news? It's so bleak and devastating. Why would I want to engage with it, right? I think for me, what continues to be really interesting about the dystopian genre is the stories of the people navigating that context.
Okay, yeah.
And so I think that though it's really bleak, what we see is, conformity largely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the story arc generally starts with a point of conformity.
Okay.
And then we see humans and individuals challenge the status quo.
Yes.
And they want to basically contest it or they rebel against it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of hero's journey is what's so compelling about a dystopian genre, right? We want to feel hopeful and we want to see the opportunity in responding to the tale of caution.
Yeah.
That like, no, hold on, we can subvert the challenges that we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting with Black Mirror, though.
Mm-hmm.
I find that over the series that we've seen for many years, the episodes don't necessarily end on a positive or hopeful note. A lot of them are also tragedies.
They are.
So, I mean, it can feel a little bit bleak at times.
Yeah.
But I think there is a lesson in these series. It's not necessarily evident. It's not like a fable where it's very obvious that, you have to be good and you have to do good things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, one could take them as cautionary tales of if this power is unchecked, if this technological advancement is misused, then we could end in scenarios.
These are the consequences.
Yeah. And naturally, because it's a dramatic series, they're blown out of proportion. They're showing the extreme.
Hyperboles.
Exactly. So they're showing like the cases where someone goes to the nth degree and does something really extreme with it. We're not seeing the everyday use of tech, which is what Black Mirror generally revolves around. We don't really see environmental or authoritarian kind of dystopias in Black Mirror, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
If you were to think about Black Mirror over all the seasons that have released, do you have like episodes that you'd recommend people watch? Because what's really interesting about Black Mirror is it's an episodic format.
Correct.
Which means that you can take any episode and watch it, and it's kind of like a self-contained story, right? It's almost like a little film in itself. There isn't really any interconnectedness between the episodes. You can watch them in any order as well. So do you have any recommendations for people who haven't seen Black Mirror? Like, check out this episode or something like that?
That's such a good question. For me, one of the episodes that I love, I really like, I think it's quite rewatchable as well. I think it was season 3.
Okay.
I can't remember what episode it was, but it was the one about social status and ranking.
Dude, yes, that's my same answer.
Yes,
same answer.
I think it's called Nosedive.
Nosedive.
Isn't that such a great episode?
I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Because you know what? It adopts that rating system, which honestly, we rate without knowing all the time, right? Like we rate our Uber experience, we Google review, or we rate a restaurant experience.
Yeah.
It feels like so simple. Yeah. And what's really interesting about that episode is that the world opens up certain opportunities to you based on what your ranking is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It's honestly, that I 100% agree. That's an episode people should watch. If I'm not mistaken, did you tell me that when you were teaching in high school,
we would watch certain Black Mirror
you use them as study tools almost, right? Or text to study.
Yeah. So whenever we taught dystopia, depending on the age, dystopia, if we were teaching it to like year 10, year 11, year 12, we would pick certain episodes. Obviously, there are like ratings that you want to honor.
Yeah.
And we would use them as texts that we would study.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Funnily, though, you know how we were talking about how like a lot of episodes don't end on a positive note. This one actually ends, though she ends up like in prison. I don't know if you remember. She ends up in prison.
Yeah.
But it does kind of end on a positive note because she's no longer worried about what people think of her.
Yes.
So in prison, she kind of expresses herself.
Right.
So she is like liberated from that system in a sense.
Yes. Which is, I think, you would consider that a happy ending.
Another fun fact about that episode, because that's how much I really like this episode, is that it was co-written by Rashida Jones.
Okay, so this is really interesting.
Good segue.
You know why? Because I was going to say I would recommend 2 episodes in all of the Black Mirror
Okay, hit us.
One was Nosedive, and the second one is Common People, which Rashida Jones is in. So I think maybe what I've discovered here is
Rashida Jones.
I like her writing. I don't know if she wrote Common People, but if she's attached to the project, maybe that's what I'm like.
Yes.
But the other tip I was going to say for someone who's never seen Black Mirror is don't start with season 1, episode 1.
That's the mistake I made.
You made that mistake. So I think the reason I'm saying that is because it is a very intense episode. I think if you start with that, it can put you off. It's not necessarily representative of what the Black Mirror canon offers. I don't think it involves technology in the same way that most of the other episodes do. So I would suggest watch some of the other episodes first. Like start with episode 2 in season 1. I think that's a great one to start with, and then come back to the first one.
I agree, because that left me jarred, and I genuinely felt like I decided Black Mirror was not the show for me, and then had to claw my way back in and realized, no, hold on, that was just kind of a black sheep kind of episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's quite interesting, because if we talk about season 7, the first episode is Common People.
Yes.
And it is gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt that way, but you fundamentally see two people so madly in love with one person who will go to any extent for that person.
Yes, absolutely. What is really interesting, I love so many things about this episode, right? So I have a lot of thoughts.
I know. Go. Hit us.
The first thing is they picked 2 actors. So they picked Chris O'Dowd and Rashida Jones, who we have only seen in comedic roles.
I know. IT Crowd.
IT Crowd in The Office. And I guess Rashida Jones was, I believe, also in Parks and Rec. So these are all comedies. Now they've picked 2 comedic actors and put them in an episode which is super like emotional, sensitive, all about the relationship. There's not really much comedy in there, right? And I think this is what I love about the show. It's that it gives actors the opportunity to play really like well-written, nuanced characters. I wonder if there's a connection to this with the fact that Charlie Brooker, who's the showrunner and creator of Black Mirror, he has a comedy writing background.
No way.
Yeah. So, okay. This might surprise you.
Okay.
Do you remember the show we watched on Netflix called Kunk on Earth?
I do.
Right?
Did he write that as well? Stop.
Diane Morgan plays Philomena Kang. It's this mockumentary. It's like a satire of the world.
Yeah.
And then you're like, hold on, they're so different, but it kind of makes sense.
It does.
Because it's all about interpreting the world in an odd, unusual way. Comedy does
observation.
That. It's observation. And comedy does that a lot. And so does satire. And I think Black Mirror is one end of that.
If you think about someone who writes comedy well, the best writers are those that, kind of like bring the audience into the like greatest moment of tension, right? Like they're leading up to a punchline. So they need to like prime the audience really well. So it's quite interesting how Charlie Brooker, with his comedy background, is writing or is a part of a project that has like really solid writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it, 10 out of 10, that episode.
I think so. It honestly is my favorite one of the season.
Yeah.
By far. And I think it really hit me because of the way they portrayed this whole like living on a subscription. I think we resonated on so many levels. And it's really interesting because it's almost like, are they taking a dig at Netflix? Because Netflix did this, right? They had a service and then they introduced ads, and then it's like, well, you can pay more if you don't want ads.
Yes.
And so applying this sort of commercial model to someone's life, it was like, wow, a masterstroke in my opinion. And one of the other things that I loved was throughout the season, actually, I think each episode could be distilled down into one really primal, fundamental human desire or emotion. It's like the underlying theme, right? So no matter what the story is, there's a real human raw emotion at the crux of it. And I think in this case, it was survival. it's like, what will you do to survive, right? What will Rashida Jones, I think her character's name is Amanda.
Yes.
And Mike, right? What will they do to survive in terms of their relationship, in terms of their own life?
Correct.
Yeah.
When we talk about short story form or writing an arc, right? A narrative arc, and we build out our protagonists, we look at 3 key features. We look at what do the characters fear?
Yeah.
What do they desire? And what are their weaknesses, or what's their weakness? And Amanda and Mike's relationship, their own individual journeys hit every single beat.
Yeah.
Mike fears losing Amanda.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The stakes are so high. Their desire is to be with each other, right? The constant returning to their anniversary date.
Yeah.
And their weakness is the system.
Yeah. Well, their financial situation.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. That's the obstacle, isn't it? Yeah. So honestly, if you're watching season 7 and you watch episode 1, yeah, you're in for a treat.
Honestly.
Right? Okay, episode 2.
Yeah, let's go.
Bete Noire. Do you know what that means, by the way? Bete Noire. I looked it up.
Tell us.
Bete Noire. I didn't know what it
I was going to guess, and I was like, nah.
Okay. Well, do you want to have a guess?
No.
Okay. Bete Noire actually means this feeling of when you really dislike something or someone. Right? Now, this is the episode where we see Maria, who is, I think, essentially some kind of food designer or food engineer. I'm not sure what her official title is, but
loosely as a food engineer.
She's creating confectionery snacks, right, for her company. And someone comes and joins, and that person was someone she knew from high school named Verity, which means
truth.
And that's really very symbolic.
I know.
Because I think when we learn about this whole exchange of she has this power to alter reality based on her wishes, that she can change the truth of the world. I thought that was oh wow, this is a lot of pretty amazing power to instill someone with, right?
Well, it's speaking to a fundamental human experience, which is, that experience of being in a scenario where someone's gaslighting you, right? They're altering the narrative to fit their version of the truth.
Yes. Absolutely.
So it's actually quite relatable.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And how did you feel about the ending of this? Because for me, that was the one part which it left me a little bit wanting something different.
Oh, okay. Go on.
So, I think up till sort of the 90% of the episode, I was fully with it because I'm like, wow, okay, this is happening. Is she believing her? Is she not? What is she going to do? And then it comes to this climax where Maria confronts Verity, right? They have this essentially sequence where they're physically fighting.
Yeah.
I wasn't happy with the end shot. Ooh. Where we show Maria as having amassed this infinite power.
Yeah.
Because that, for me, wasn't the point of the episode. The point was not, I think the episode was all about power and dynamics, right? Who had the power in high school? Who has the power now?
Correct.
And who's vying for it? But I think at the same way, it wasn't about Maria and seeking more power.
I think it's our innate human desire to witness a redemption story.
Yes.
Right? So we want Maria to basically check the power position that Verity kind of has at that point.
Yes.
Equally, what's really interesting is that sensation as an audience we feel around the dissatisfaction of that, right? Or we're kind of annoyed that, hold on, how come Maria's the one who's embodied that power again?
Yeah.
Equally, don't you think it's quite interesting though that the writers left on that intentional note?
Well, obviously that's their choice and that's their show. They can do whatever they want. I think I'm just saying as a fan or as a viewer, as an audience member, I was sort of being led along this journey thinking this amount of infinite power is not right for anyone to hold.
Yes.
And that Verity needs to be stripped of this power, which Maria must do, and redeem herself and restore balance. But then at the end, it's why was Maria being rewarded for that? And I think unless there's going to be a part 2 where we show the consequences of this, it feels like maybe for the moral messaging of it was a little bit like gray for me. It's fine. It's not an issue. It's just me being like, well, I wish it happened this way. But
yeah, we want like a tightly like bow, a bow tie ending.
Yeah.
Right? Which I think is quite interesting because it is a little bit Charlie Brooker-esque to leave the audience a little bit irked, I think I agree though. I felt the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Bete Noire, still a really good episode though, even if we didn't like the ending or if I didn't. but Hotel Reverie, so that was episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts about that? Did you, because I'm curious to know, I think that's one episode that I think people would either like or dislike.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious to hear what you thought about it.
It was interesting. I don't know that it would be high on my rewatch list in the Black Mirror anthology. However, what was really compelling about this episode was this idea of having a digital avatar, right? That enters a historic context. So it's playing with some really fantastical elements of like time travel, but in a very futuristic way.
Yeah.
And I actually am so curious to hear how film crew or, a film crew, directors, actors are feeling about this, because are we far off from filmmaking in this way?
I mean, the tech that they showed in this one, I think, is not possible. I'm just going to put it out there. What they can do is, of course, like insert performances. Like they can't literally transport an actor into a movie. What they can do is, digitally edit that and make it look like that. So I don't know if you remember, there was another episode of Black Mirror, I think in season 6, called "Joan is Awful."
Oh,
this is the one where which starred the actress who plays Alexis.
Yes.
Right? And it's like this show that's happening, and it's all about like this deep fake technology and how they're essentially replacing the face or replacing the physical appearance of someone. So I think that kind of stuff doable. I think the tech here is very fictional, if I can say it that way. Yeah, but I think it's interesting. It was a very interesting story because on the surface it appears to be all about someone going back into a film to reenact a performance. But I think the underlying human theme here is about being trapped.
Yeah.
Right? Brandy physically gets trapped in that movie.
She does.
And then also Dorothy is trapped as her character in the movie, right? And we learn about how Dorothy had more of a life than just, I think, the character she plays. So I think there's this idea of entrapment and how humans are trying to escape from that, expressed through this episode. It was one that I think went on a bit too long.
Yeah.
If I can be honest. So I think there wasn't like a great... There were some plot points which were nice.
What was the resolution again?
The resolution was that they finished the film. Like she
but they
got to
don't
the credits.
say the line.
Well, I think she does say the line. She gets to the end and she does come out from it, but she's lost Dorothy.
Oh.
Right? And what's really unique about it is, in a lot of dystopian stories, it's all about, I think Orwell does this really well, this idea of being watched. And they're literally being watched, right? By Kimi, the director, played by Awkwafina, and the other crew. They're observing the film taking place. The minute their contact is lost is when they can be real.
Yes.
When you're no longer watched, then you can express who you really are. And that's when Brandy and Dorothy's relationship really sort of prospers.
Correct.
And so then the minute that your big brother kind of figures come back in and start to dictate the terms of your life and your movements, that snaps again. So I think there's some really cool layers that they show. But I just felt like maybe in the storytelling of it, they could have gotten there faster, potentially, because I felt like I didn't need to watch the entire film.
Yeah.
But
I was thinking that too. Did we need to watch the entire film? I agree. I agree with your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And then episode 4, this was a very interesting one. It was called Plaything.
It was so so interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, my views on it were very much that I think it's like a cautionary tale about AI. That's how I interpreted it. Did you see it the same way?
Definitely, that we become subservient or submit to AI.
Yeah, right? And then obviously there's this character who's like basically become obsessed with these AI creatures that, it feels like it needs to protect and foster and nurture and care for.
Correct.
Until it becomes a slave to them and is not fulfilling the demands. Now, I think throughout the episode, what they do a really good job of is making you doubt, hold on, is this guy delusional?
Yeah.
Or is he really onto something? Whether genuinely these AI creatures are there to, have the power to redeem the world and enhance them.
Live a digital life,
if that's even possible, or whether he's just out of his mind.
Yeah.
And I think that question stays with us until the end, where they basically give us the answer of, nope, there is a singularity event, and
I know.
The world is doomed.
And what I love about the way this episode was written is that we teeter on that line based on the conversations he's having in that room. So when he's speaking to the detective, we're like, this guy sounds a little bit off. And then the psychologist is in there.
Yeah.
And she draws out this really human element to him. And she goes, hold on, let's not write him off yet.
Yeah.
And she indulges him.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do we end up with the pen and paper in the room?
Yeah.
Because she fights the case for it.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's also really interesting that they both represent those two polar identities of him.
The open-minded one and the one who's dismissive.
Yes.
Yeah. That was very well illustrated.
It was like the conductor did such a good job, kind of balancing that narrative. Sure. I really, really liked that.
Yeah. Then we had episode 5, which was Eulogy. What were your thoughts?
What was really interesting? When the episode started, it was the first time that I felt this tech is not bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
The context was really interesting and compelling. Death and grief is a natural part of life.
Yeah.
And cool, we have this system or this tech that allows us to compile memories that other people have.
Yeah.
And, create a highly personalized experience at a wake or a funeral.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of was bought into that idea.
And it seemed ethical because there was a moment.
Yes.
There was a moment where he's like, well, can't you just show me a photo of her? And they said, no, we can't bring in external material because that'll influence your memory.
Correct.
So I was like, oh, cool. This is ethical tech. Like, this is interesting.
Seems thought out. Seems like there are some rules and regulations.
Yeah. What I was really also intrigued about was I want to see the making of this episode because I'm very curious about how they created those essentially 3D versions of the photos we see. My guess when we were watching it was those were like wax statues that they put into a space so that these characters can move around them. But I could be completely wrong about that. They could have just used VFX to do it too, potentially.
Yes.
Because you had certain times where like the face was not a real face.
Correct.
Because you couldn't see it. Things were blurry. But yeah, I'm really curious to see how they actually made that, whether that was a practical effect that they did on set or whether that was something done in post.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. What did you think of the episode?
I think it was good. I agree with you that it was almost like, wow, tech is on our side for this one. What didn't work for me was the reveal of who the guide is. I don't know, it didn't...
Like just you asked me to skip the intro.
Yeah, exactly. But also like from the tone of that guide, I had guessed that it was very evident that something's up here.
There's a personal...
This is not an objective person. This is a person with a bias. So when they reveal who the guide is, I was like, oh yeah, okay. It didn't mean much to me. Yeah, I think it was nice to watch him almost like try and get closure on that relationship. And I think that's what this episode is about.
Correct.
It's about closure for multiple characters.
Yeah.
So I think that was really nice, and I think his performance was really good. This actor's performance was really good. I feel like I've seen him in other things. I just can't remember what.
Yeah, we must have.
But yeah, so I liked it on that front. But for me, the plot points just didn't work as well as I would have hoped. I think the resolution of it was a little bit like, oh, okay, that's it. I was expecting a very Black Mirror-esque twist to come in, something to be presented to me. But as I said,
Correct.
that reveal just didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we, again, talk about a narrative arc, right? When we think about an episode, we consider it as a short story form, right? And when we come to an ending, we're looking for two things. We're looking for, are we surprised by this? And was this ending inevitable?
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think on some level it was inevitable.
Sure.
We kind of knew he was going to end up at the funeral.
Yeah.
Were we surprised?
Yeah, that's what I'm... Yeah, exactly.
No.
The shift wasn't surprising.
Correct.
Yeah. That was nice. And then the final episode.
I was really excited about this episode because we intentionally rewatched the first episode.
Yeah.
How do we call it?
So USS Callister, there was an episode, I believe in season, I can't remember, 5? 6?
Yeah, season 5.
Season 5. And then they've basically done a sequel to that.
Correct.
And that's the last episode in season 7. So yeah, having sort of watched it recently, we were, I guess, across the finer details of what happened. And were you happy with the sequel?
When we sat down to watch it, I don't know what it is about watching the timing on an episode, but I was intrigued that it was the longest episode of this season.
Yeah.
Coming up to 90 minutes, which now we're ending up in a film.
Yes, that's a film.
Arena. Or it's a film. Did it present as a film? I'm not so sure. This is not to say that I didn't like the episode.
Okay.
I'm just kind of curious about how they set that episode out. It felt like we picked up where we left off.
Yes, we did. Absolutely.
But did it have its standalone arc? Say if someone hadn't watched.
Yeah. I don't think anyone who hadn't watched it would have appreciated this one.
No.
Yes, for sure. Given you have watched it.
Yes.
Yeah. What were your takeaways?
Isn't it really interesting that at the end of this episode, we feel bad for Robert Daly?
Do you?
Well,
I didn't.
Oh,
but this
okay.
is really cool. Okay, tell me why you felt bad for Robert Daly.
Well, I felt bad that he is trapped in the infinity.
Yeah, in the game, essentially.
In the game.
In the heart, yeah.
In the heart. He's ended up needing to live a very subservient life, given that he was so talented.
Sure.
And then we come to that point, the nuance of unchecked power.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Do I entirely feel bad for him? No. But there was that human empathy moment for me.
Yeah. Well, they're doing that on purpose.
I know. And I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah. They're just pulling at your heartstrings.
That is me.
Yeah. I don't feel bad for him at all because I think it's karma. So the way I see it was, well, this guy... There's multiple, say, versions of him, right? There's the version of him where he was really young and excited about building this thing as a tribute to his favorite TV show, and he got taken advantage of. Poor him. Then he gets the power of, he's essentially co-running this company, but what is he doing with his talent?
Yeah.
Right? He's very talented, but what is he doing with it? We see another version where he's trapped.
Correct.
He was hard done by.
Yeah.
But then when he gets an opportunity, what does he do?
I know.
So I think for me, it's all evening out of the cruelty that he's inflicted on others.
Yeah.
Had also been inflicted on him, and I think that balances for me. So therefore,
all of those timelines kind of amalgamate together, right? The things you did in this timeline or this version.
I think the morality of it balances out.
Yeah,
in my view.
That's true.
And I think, I'm also really gray about my perspective on Nanette Cole because I'm not so sure she's just innocent.
Yeah.
I know that's a weird thing for me to say after having watched that, but I think her choice at the end feels selfish, right? And I don't know if I blame her for that or I'm like, yeah, good on you for doing that. But it feels a little bit selfish at the end.
What part feels selfish for you?
It was self-preservation for her, right? She wanted to live in her real world, but she didn't negotiate that for the others. She didn't make it work for the others. You know, as a captain, you think that as a leader, you want to be there for others too. I don't think she was a leader in that way. She wasn't the right leader. So maybe that's what didn't sit like. I love the character. I have no problem with the show, with the episode. I'm just saying, like, this is what irked me as a viewer.
Yes.
But I think as an episode, it was great.
For sure. I think I think her character is so complex, right? And even at the end, though she chooses a different reality for herself to exist in, it's quite interesting because she's interconnected with the digital avatars of that crew.
Sure. Yes.
And they're kind of like bound. So it's kind of like she made this choice and now she has to exist with the consequences that they are embedded in her reality.
That's true. Yeah, I guess it's not like there are consequences to that, which is
Do you think there's going to be another episode?
I don't think so. No, I don't think there's more to this story that I think this is it. I would love to see maybe a part 2 of Bete Noire, you know, where we see what happens with when Maria has this power.
True.
I think a part 2 for that maybe, but I don't think a part 2 for this.
No, I think they wrapped up the story because they dealt with Daly and his partner as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's, I'm going to put you in a hypothetical situation here, right? You are going to a meeting with Charlie Brooker tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Right? And you have an opportunity to pitch an episode of Black Mirror to him for him to make in season 45.
Wow.
I'm joking. At some point, okay? What would be your Black Mirror episode?
Okay, I have concepts of a plan.
Excellent.
Because it's going to be great.
Oh, okay. I think we know where this is going. I think we've seen this, but tell us anyway.
So one of my, I don't know if you can call it a hot take for season 7, was I felt that though it was one of the strongest seasons I've seen, I thought it was really, really tight.
Yeah.
I felt that it leaned very heavily on AI and tech and digital avatars and digital identities as the recurring motif.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe in previous seasons, there's been a little bit more variety across their episodes. And that inspired me for this meeting.
Okay.
So I think what I would love to pitch an episode for is something about like climate action or climate change. So I'm thinking like Dune, where everyone's got like a mask.
Yes.
We live in like an environment or a society where like air quality is on the fritz.
Sure.
We effectively cannot exist without these masks.
Okay, yeah.
And I think what I would love to reflect from that is certain people have access to certain air quality.
Okay. So there's an inequality
there is an inequality
in standard of living, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to show, you know, like I want to show disparity in class in a society.
Yeah.
I want to talk about how effectively humans have ruined our earth and our environment.
Yeah.
And how they have to live with the consequences of that.
Okay.
So I think there is going to be some sort of like punishment or rating system.
Okay.
So if you've contributed to the greatest like cause of pollution, you have like certain privileges or certain things revoked. Like your system reflects that back.
Sure.
And the nuance I want to add to that is that oftentimes the dirty work has been done by people who who don't have the power.
Yes. Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, I would watch that.
Something like that. I don't know, you know, who the characters are and what would happen. I kind of want like, maybe it's because we just watched Adolescence, but I think a person in their like teen or younger age as one of the protagonists could be really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we didn't see a young performer in season 7.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think just to change the perspective, like this young person now needs to live with the consequences of generations before them.
Yeah, okay. Very Earth.
Yes. Very, very Earth.
Nice. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I have a question actually. You know how you were mentioning that this would be, you drew the parallel of the comparison to Dune. It made me think, well, films like Dune, they would be considered fantasy films.
True.
Is a fantasy film also a dystopia? Like, what are the traits here of what qualifies as a dystopian film or a show?
There is certainly an overlap. I think films that exist or stories that exist in fantasy, because they are largely like otherworldly, will have tropes of the challenges that, society in those spaces are navigating.
Yeah.
So we will see dystopic elements potentially. I guess it's about, are there characters that will subvert or rebel against an existing system? Right. That's, a core quality. Is there an authoritarian regime or system that's suppressing that our characters need to navigate?
But I mean, if you look back at season 7 as an example, like Eulogy, we don't have a system or authoritarian figure, right? So, but we would still classify that as dystopian.
I wouldn't classify it as a fantasy though, because it's existing within the parameters of our lives, right? Human life.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. I was thinking along the same lines, and I was like, well, I think fantasy inevitably will have, every story we listen or watch will have conflict. So a fantasy world will inevitably have its set of rules.
Correct.
And conflicts. But for me, a dystopia is something where it's a world that is like mine in almost always, except for some small bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool episode. I think, this idea of climate change is very real for us. So it's almost like a peek into the future, very Black Mirror-esque. I think that could work really well. Charlie Brooker would probably greenlight it. Yeah.
I need to find his Calendly so I can book a appointment.
Okay.
Book it with Brooker.
Okay. Sure.
Over to you. How would what would your pitch be to?
Mine has similar themes to yours. So here's my pitch. Okay.
Go.
We're living in a world which is very much like ours, but there has been this new biomedical tech which allows one person or a person to exercise on behalf of another. So let's say you exercised on my behalf. That means whatever gains you made would be transferred to my body.
Whoa.
This results in a world where the wealthy can now hire other people to exercise for them and essentially make them like super fit, godlike people, right? And then it also then creates a parallel gambling industry on like, I guess, fitness competitions to see who's the fittest, but who gets abused in the process? It's the workers.
Wow.
I think I'm almost like drawing a parallel to this entire industry of like food deliveries, where it's like the wealthy just place orders.
Yes.
And then food gets delivered to them, but the process of getting that food there is so laborsome and cumbersome.
Yeah.
But
undervalued.
Undervalued and overlooked. So I'm almost like the same thing where there's an inherent gain if you're wealthy that you can exercise on someone else's behalf, abusing that power, and then for personal gain, but then there has got to be some consequences, I think.
That is really cool because I think it's also speaking to how people are like constantly busy, right? Like what is the greatest barrier to focusing on our health and well-being? Oftentimes it's we don't have time, right? And so I think it could be really interesting to watch these people who start to like adopt hacks or leverage, help.
Yes, true. So let's see if Charlie Brooker, if you're listening, we've got 2 Black Mirror episodes lined up.
Easy.
And if you see any of these episodes in season 8, you heard it here first.
Honestly, can you imagine?
I mean,
and he could give us a credit.
Yeah, I'll take a writing credit, thanks.
Yeah.
And a payment. for the writing.
I don't mind being like an extra on that set. I reckon that could be really fun.
Okay. Interesting. Well, maybe you'll see Geetu in there.
I mean, it's a British show, right?
It is a British show, and I think many good things start as British shows.
True.
And then America comes in and adds its own flavor to it.
Wasn't that one of the criticisms of previous seasons of Black Mirror, that they went to like American context? Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was reading on Reddit about Black Mirror season 7 was they really liked the balance of British and American stories.
Yeah, I think the blend was really good.
So tight.
Yeah, it almost felt like every episode had some element of both.
Correct.
For the most part anyways. So yeah, I think it was quite cool to see these two ideologies of like, two cultures of storytelling interact. And it didn't disturb me as a viewer at all. It didn't feel out of place.
I agree.
I think in an increasingly international world, it kind of almost made sense. That was really cool. Well, thank you, Geetu, for watching Black Mirror Season 7 with me. We binged it in very quick time.
We did.
But also thank you for joining me and breaking this down, because I think I find it really enjoyable to talk about shows that we watch, to really get another person's perspective on it, and also maybe really analyze the literary nature of something like Black Mirror, which has so many themes and nuance to really unpack. So I think it really enhances my experience of shows like this.
Me too. That was so fun.
Yeah. And thank you all for tuning in and listening. I think what I'd really love is any recommendations you've got for dystopian movies or shows that we may not mentioned. Please drop them in the comments, and then we'd love to watch them and enjoy them along with you. If this episode really resonated with you, hit the like button and share it with someone who you think would also enjoy it. And of course, please subscribe. We'd love for you to come back again and again to join us for many wonderful chats that we want to have in the future. So we'll come back in the next episode, talk about something probably very different, but equally ticket-worthy. And yeah, stay tuned. So thanks very much, Geetu.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.